Welcome back to the war. Today we're diving into one of the most legendary rivalries in military history. Two titans of warfare who faced each other in one of the most famous battles ever fought. On one side we have Napoleon Bonaparte, the audacious emperor of the French, a man who redefined military strategy and spread his influence across Europe. On the other side there's Arthur Wellesley, the Duke of Wellington, a master tactician who was the only general able to stop Napoleon's seemingly unstoppable march. What made these two commanders so formidable? What were the key differences in their strategies, their backgrounds, and their mindsets that led them to clash in a battle that would change the course of history? And most importantly, who truly came out on top in the duel that decided the fate of Europe? Strap in, because this is not just a story of strategy and warfare. It's a tale of ambition, rivalry, and the destiny of empires. This is the story of Napoleon versus Wellington. Join us at Legacy of War as we take a deeper look. Before we start the video, don't forget to check out our selection of playlists. We cover other wars like Vietnam, the World Wars, as well as Viking and Roman times. We will also be adding to our collection soon. Make sure you like, subscribe, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Now relax and enjoy the video. That's an order. Let's set the stage. It's the early 19th century, and Europe is a continent in flames. Napoleon Bonaparte has risen from the chaos of the French Revolution to become Emperor of the French. His ambition knows no bounds, and through a series of brilliant campaigns, he has carved out a vast empire, stretching from Spain to Russia. But as his power grew, so too did the coalition of nations determined to bring him down. On the other side, we have Arthur Wellesley, a man of a very different background. Born into the Anglo-Irish aristocracy, Wellesley wasn't a natural soldier. In fact, he wasn't particularly remarkable in his youth. But the military was his chosen path, and over time, he became one of Britain's most reliable generals, especially noted for his campaigns in the Peninsular War against the French. What's fascinating is that while Napoleon was known for his rapid, aggressive maneuvers, what we might call shock and awe today, Wellington was much more methodical, often described as the Iron Duke, for his ability to withstand pressure and not be easily rattled. These two very different military minds finally came head-to-head in 1815 at the Battle of Waterloo, a name that echoes through history as a symbol of total defeat or ultimate victory, depending on which side you're on. But what were the key factors that led these two men to this epic confrontation? Let's take a closer look. Background and rise to power. Napoleon's rise is the stuff of legend. Born in Corsica, a small Mediterranean island recently acquired by France, Napoleon was always something of an outsider. His early education in military schools saw him quickly rise through the ranks, largely due to his sheer brilliance and the opportunities presented by the French Revolution. By 1799, he was in control of France, and by 1804, he had crowned himself emperor. But his journey to power was not just about personal ambition. It was driven by his belief in the revolutionary principles of meritocracy and his desire to spread these across Europe. Wellington, by contrast, was born into the British aristocracy in 1769, the same year as Napoleon. His path was more conventional. He was educated at Eton and joined the military because, quite frankly, it was what was expected of someone of his class. But what he lacked in early brilliance, he made up for with perseverance and a knack for learning from experience. It wasn't until his success in the Peninsular War that he truly came into his own as a general, earning the respect of both his troops and his superiors. But here's where it gets interesting. Napoleon and Wellington had very different approaches to warfare. Napoleon was known for his aggressive, almost reckless tactics. He would often strike with overwhelming force at a single point, believing that the key to victory was to destroy the enemy's army quickly and decisively. His campaigns are full of lightning-fast movements, surprise attacks, and the use of artillery to smash through enemy lines. Wellington, on the other hand, was cautious, almost to the point of being conservative. He believed in holding strong defensive positions, letting the enemy come to him, and then striking back when they were at their weakest. His battles were often won by outlasting the enemy rather than outmaneuvering them. This difference in style is crucial to understanding how these two men approached the Battle of Waterloo. Battle of Waterloo. June 18th, 1815, a day that would go down in history. Napoleon, having escaped from exile on the island of Elba, had returned to France and quickly raised an army to challenge the coalition forces arrayed against him. He knew that his only chance was to strike quickly before the coalition could fully mobilize. Wellington, on the other hand, had been preparing for this moment for years. He had studied Napoleon's tactics, knew his weaknesses, and had a strong defensive position on the ridge of Mont Saint-Jean, just south of the village of Waterloo. But before we dive into the battle itself, let's talk about the stakes. Napoleon wasn't just fighting to win a battle, he was fighting to reclaim his empire. He knew that if he didn't win at Waterloo, it was all over. Wellington, on the other hand, was fighting to preserve the balance of power in Europe. If Napoleon won, Britain would be left isolated, and the map of Europe would be redrawn with France at the center. The battle began around 11 a.m., delayed by heavy rain that had soaked the battlefield the night before. This was no small detail. Napoleon's artillery, one of his most formidable weapons, was less effective because the muddy ground absorbed much of the impact. The rain in many ways was Wellington's first ally. The first major action of the day was the French attack on Hougomont, a fortified farmhouse on Wellington's right flank. Napoleon hoped that by capturing Hougomont, he could draw Wellington's reserves away from the center. But the attack turned into a fierce, drawn-out fight that tied up thousands of French troops without achieving the desired breakthrough. Hougomont remained in Allied hands throughout the day, becoming a symbol of Wellington's stubborn defense. Next, Napoleon launched a massive assault on the center of Wellington's line, led by Marshal Ney, his most trusted cavalry commander. Ney believed he saw signs of the British line wavering and ordered a cavalry charge, one of the largest in history, with up to 12,000 horsemen thundering across the muddy field. But Wellington had prepared for this. He had hidden his infantry behind the crest of the ridge in squares, tight formations that were nearly impervious to cavalry. The French cavalry charged again and again, but each time they were met by a wall of bayonets with devastating volleys of musket fire. It was a brutal, bloody spectacle, but it failed to break Wellington's line. While the cavalry charge was ongoing, Napoleon ordered his artillery to pound the British positions. The Grand Battery unleashed a relentless barrage, but once again the wet ground reduced its effectiveness. Meanwhile, the infantry assault in the center was equally hard-fought. The French managed to capture La Haye-Sainte, a farmhouse crucial to the Allied center, but Wellington's line still held. As the afternoon wore on, Napoleon knew he was running out of time. The Prussian army, under General Blücher, was approaching from the east, and their arrival would spell disaster for the French. In a last-ditch effort to win the battle before the Prussians could intervene, Napoleon ordered his elite troops, the Imperial Guard, to attack Wellington's center. The Imperial Guard had never been defeated in battle. They were Napoleon's most feared and loyal troops, a symbol of his power and the heart of his army. As they advanced, there was a palpable tension on the battlefield. Even Wellington knew that this was the decisive moment. The Guard marched forward in perfect formation, through smoke and cannon fire, their bearskin hats and blue uniforms making them a fearsome sight. But Wellington had one last card to play. As the Guard approached, he ordered his troops, who were lying down to avoid the French artillery, to stand and fire at close range. The volleys were devastating. The Guard faltered, then stopped. Wellington seized the moment and ordered a counterattack. The British and Dutch troops charged forward, driving the Guard back. For the first time, the Imperial Guard was forced to retreat. Napoleon's invincible troops had been broken, and with them, his hopes of victory. As the Guard fell back, the rest of Napoleon's army began to crumble. The Prussians, having finally arrived, attacked the French right flank, sealing the fate of the French army. By evening, the battlefield was a scene of chaos and carnage, with French soldiers fleeing in every direction. Napoleon, realizing that the battle was lost, left the field and returned to Paris. His army was shattered, and with it, his dreams of empire. Aftermath and legacy. The Battle of Waterloo wasn't just the end of a battle, it was the end of an era. Napoleon's defeat marked the conclusion of the Napoleonic Wars, which had ravaged Europe for over a decade. In the immediate aftermath, Napoleon was forced to abdicate and was exiled to the remote island of St. Helena, where he would spend the remaining years of his life. For Wellington, the victory at Waterloo cemented his reputation as one of history's greatest military commanders. He returned to Britain as a national hero and later entered politics, becoming prime minister. But the cost of the battle was immense. Around 50,000 men were killed or wounded in just a single day, a grim reminder of the human cost of war. The battle also had a profound impact on European history. With Napoleon's defeat, the major powers of Europe, Britain, Austria, Prussia, and Russia, gathered at the Congress of Vienna to redraw the map of the continent and establish a balance of power that would prevent any one nation from dominating the others. This concert of Europe brought a century of relative peace and stability to the continent, although it was not without its tensions and conflicts. The legacy of Waterloo. The legacy of Waterloo is vast, touching on military, political, and cultural aspects of European history. Militarily, the battle is studied as a classic example of defensive warfare, with Wellington's use of terrain and disciplined troops becoming a model for future commanders. The phrase "meeting one's Waterloo" has entered the lexicon, symbolizing a final, decisive defeat. Politically, the battle marked the end of the Revolutionary and Napoleonic eras. With Napoleon's downfall, the old monarchies of Europe were restored, and conservative forces regained control, at least temporarily, across much of the continent. However, the ideas of the French Revolution, liberty, equality, fraternity, had already taken root, and they would continue to influence European politics in the years to come. Culturally, Waterloo became a symbol of heroism and sacrifice. Monuments and memorials were erected across Europe, and the battle inspired countless works of art, literature, and music. Victor Hugo's Les Miserables, for example, includes a detailed account of the battle, highlighting its significance in the broader sweep of history. But perhaps the most intriguing legacy of Waterloo is the ongoing debate about the commanders themselves. Who was the greater general, Napoleon or Wellington? Napoleon, with his flair for innovation, his audacious strategies, and his almost unmatched string of victories? Or Wellington, with his steady, methodical approach, his ability to hold firm under pressure, and his ultimate triumph at Waterloo? Napoleon versus Wellington, the final assessment. Let's consider their strengths and weaknesses as military leaders. Napoleon was a master of the offensive, capable of making rapid, decisive moves that overwhelmed his enemies. His ability to inspire his troops and his sheer audacity on the battlefield made him a formidable opponent. However, his aggressive tactics often relied on speed and surprise, and when these elements were neutralized, as they were at Waterloo, his strategies could falter. Wellington, in contrast, was the epitome of the defensive commander. He knew how to pick his battles and how to prepare his positions so that the enemy's strengths would be turned into weaknesses. His coolness under fire and his ability to maintain discipline among his troops were key factors in his success. But Wellington's style was also seen as cautious and sometimes slow to exploit opportunities, traits that could have been disadvantages against a more flexible opponent. At Waterloo, it was Wellington's defensive genius that carried the day. He successfully absorbed Napoleon's attacks, managed his reserves carefully, and waited for the right moment to strike back. It was a victory not just of tactics, but of temperament. Wellington's ability to remain calm and focused under immense pressure was crucial. However, it's important to remember that Waterloo was not just a one-on-one duel. The arrival of the Prussians, the weather conditions, and even the physical and mental state of the commanders played a role in the outcome. Some historians argue that if any of these variables had been different, the battle, and perhaps history itself, might have taken a different course. Conclusion. So who was the better general? It's a question that has fueled debates for over 2 centuries. Napoleon was undoubtedly a military genius, with a string of victories that reshaped Europe. But Wellington's victory at Waterloo cannot be overlooked. It was the final, decisive blow that ended Napoleon's reign. In the end, perhaps it's not about who was the better general, but about understanding that these two men represented different approaches to warfare, each effective in its own right. Napoleon's audacity versus Wellington's steadfastness, Two sides of the same coin that together tell the story of one of the most dramatic periods in military history. Waterloo was more than just a battle. It was a turning point in world history. The end of Napoleon's reign marked the beginning of a new order in Europe, one that would shape the continent for generations to come. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Check back in again soon. Salute.